Hey y'all, it's Kendall from Aspire Counseling and Wellness Center, coming to you on this beautiful Tuesday morning with the Q&A, Parents' Words Matter. There were some technical difficulties that I was unable to fix in time yesterday. That's why this is airing a day late, so my apologies if this is late for someone, but I wanted to make sure to get it out for you. We're going to go ahead and get started. There were several questions that were shared with me or that I was able to generate based off scenarios that I've seen working with families and children. Um, and I think that they bear a wealth of knowledge for you parents out there that are wondering how to improve relationships with your children, improve the way that you're communicating with your children, or possibly improve the relationship with your own parents. Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it works for your kids, there's no reason that it can't work for the other relationships in your life. So we're going to get started. And the first question that was sent to me was, why is it so important to speak positively to my child? And I would say that a layperson would say, duh, this is common sense, but I don't carry that particular judgment because we all grew up in different home situations. Our families of origin differ. Not everyone was raised the same, so not everyone grew up with the positive speakings and positive interactions with their parents. So some people may generally not have an appropriate way to respond to this. And so I'm very grateful for the individual that sent me this question because I never want to do anything to induce shame or make someone feel guilty. It's all about uplifting and encouraging and educating and supporting, especially when you have enough courage to ask any of these questions. So, my response is that I've said this before, that the way that we speak to our children is going to, at some point, may become what their inner voice sounds like. So if your child is growing up with a household full of criticism, that's what they'll hear. With their own particular self-talk will be highly critical. And it could even sound like your voice. But speaking positively to a child is going to help your child feel more safe, more secure, knowing that hopefully making them feel that you are a person that's going to nurture them and protect them, not someone that's going to deride them, belittle them, and make them feel afraid, which can will influence their particular, type of attachment, be it anxious attachment, secure attachment, insecure attachment. That's a whole nother conversation, right? But the type of relationship that they have with their family of origin and their parents, for sure, will the ripple effect can be seen throughout the rest of the child's life. So speaking positively also encourages a level of feeling loved and your child feeling competent in themselves and knowing that their parents like them just by the language that's being used. So positive communication is also a catalyst to help your child develop a healthy self-concept, the way that they feel about themselves, or a healthy self-esteem, their own self-perception of their self-worth. Um, and, speaking positively to your child is hopefully going to help them with a level of self-acceptance. So when you are speaking positively, you're also modeling, what a healthy communication style, a healthy relationship looks like. So if someone isn't used to being spoken positively to, it's very hard for them, not impossible, because we can unlearn behavior if we're aware that the behavior is detrimental to our life. But if they're unaware of what that looks like, it's hard for them to replicate it in their daily lives with their communication styles with either friends or, teachers, or as they get older, romantic partners and employees. I believe that we've all, worked for people that you wonder, how is it that you learn to talk to people like that? And a lot of issues that we see in adults stems from their childhood, the learned behavior that they've acquired, or maybe the learned behavior that they've unlearned over time and possibly therapy. Um, but lastly, when you speak positively or affirming or encouraging to your children, it strengthens the relationship that you have with your child, which can make it easier to have other difficult conversations in the future. I mean, as they grow older, not always going to do things that you like, but having that strong foundation, knowing that your child having the sense and knowing that they can come to you and talk to you without judgment about anything, that you're going to listen, that you're going to be understanding, that you're going to offer sound advice, is going to go a long way to them not keeping secrets and being open with you. And that's definitely the type of relationship that you want. Our children are contending with a lot of things that some of us never had to deal with growing up, from food insecurity to overstimulation with social media, rampant feelings of anxiety and depression, lots of self-harm. And these are things that you definitely want to create an environment of security and safety for your child to feel welcome to talk to you about. So I really appreciate that question. And the answers that I'm providing definitely aren't an exhaustive list. I do have a time limit. I don't want to talk your ear off. But if you are seeking consultation, I do parent coaching. You're welcome to reach out to me, or I can help you identify someone that can assist you as well. So it's just really to help your child grow and develop into a healthy human being with healthy self-esteem, a high self-regard, and the ability to connect with others, because the way that you connect with them is certainly going to influence their interpersonal relationships. So that's a very good question to start off with. So question number 2, I've noticed, we're all struggling during the pandemic at some level. I've noticed that since the pandemic, I've been yelling a lot at my kids. What are some of the long-term effects of yelling at my children, and how can I minimize my yelling, especially when I'm angry? I believe that this is going to be a very common way that a lot of parents are feeling, because you're all cooped up in the house at the same time. It's hard to have your own personal space. And if you're here, or if you're in a house, and you'd rather be somewhere else, that can be very difficult to contend with. So I will say that the research states that yelling at your children is not the thing to do. Finding a way to communicate with them that does not involve yelling is going to be extremely important to their identity formation. Well, and we're all human. We make mistakes, right? So yelling will happen. But if it is your predominant way of communicating, it's going to be imperative that you identify a way in which to get your needs met or get your ideas across in a more effective and affirming manner. So it's important to be firm without raising your voice. You can do it. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen overnight. It may take practice, but it is possible. And I believe that unlearning, for parents, unlearning a lot of behavior is going to take place when you are relearning how to parent your children differently and more effectively. Because the kids that we have now are not the kids that we were back then. The times are different. I think it's important and it's prudent upon us to do things a bit differently, because they just contend with different things. So I was doing some research, and according to the Child Mind Institute, when you're yelling, you often fail to get your point across. And if you really pay attention to your kids, when we're yelling, we're literally in the heat of the moment. So we're probably at the height of our frustration. We're probably not communicating. Well, obviously, we're not communicating effectively. Maybe we're not hitting those salient points that we really want our kids to understand. And the message is getting lost in the emotion. So we're, really operating from that reptilian brain, not from our prefrontal cortex of reason and sound judgment, right? It's really on that emotional aspect that we're really irritated right now, and we want to communicate our irritation, and we want compliance, immediate compliance. So it's really key that you understand that when you're yelling, it's really not communicating your message effectively. Like I said, your emotions intensify and they take over the actual message. So, which again sets off that fight or flight response in your child. Because if you're really paying attention to your kid, if you start yelling, they tend to shut down. I see it every day in schools that I work in when people haven't learned how to communicate information effectively to that one kid that stays needing attention. And then you resort to yelling. That child shuts down, is not listening to you because they're trying to feel safe and they don't want to be attacked and embarrassed. And so they withdraw, right? So they're not really hearing what you're saying. You're probably not communicating as effectively as you could in the first place. So, but yelling, it escalates negative behavior. You might get compliance in the moment, but you probably won't receive the type of joined in support understanding that you're looking to get by the way that you're communicating. And most parents, they want their kids to be successful. They want them to do things that aren't going to be harmful. They want them to make good decisions. But I know that when you've dealt with something over and over and over and the behavior seems not to change, that you feel exasperated. I truly get it. But we have to find ways in which to communicate in a more effective manner where you're getting the outcome that you are desiring and you're not damaging a relationship in the process. So these are some things that can happen if yelling is a continual way in which you're communicating with your children. So it can be very hard on their self-esteem. The research states that yelling and speaking harshly or being really harsh to your kids is associated with lower self-esteem in kids. It can affect their performance in school. It can diminish their ability to communicate in an assertive manner, meaning that they may potentially resort to yelling themselves because they've learned, oh, this is what my parents do. It works for them, so I'm going to do this same behavior. I'm going to replicate the way that they communicate because they get what they want, so this is what I'm going to do. It's kind of like the bully learning how to become a bully. So, again, kids who are often the recipient of harsh verbal communication are at a higher risk for aggressive behavior and disruptive behavior. Again, it's a learned behavior. Our kids might come out of the womb crying, but not yelling. So there's a Dr. Dick Stein. He says that he cautions parents that yell at their children often because it can often make the children feel like their parents don't love them or don't like them, which is going to probably cause them to withdraw, not really be themselves around you, and you may not get to experience the fullness of your child and expand upon the parent-child relationship. So yelling is harmful. Additionally, like I said, there's a missed opportunity to form a positive bond with your kids when yelling is the predominant way in which you communicate. They could begin to internalize those negative interactions. Is there something wrong with me? My parents keep yelling at me. They don't do anything but criticize me. So there must be something wrong with me. Again, they don't have the ability to fully think through and understand what's happening, and may not have the verbal acumen to sit and communicate with you about how they're feeling, how what you're doing is making them feel. And they're not going to because they don't feel safe if your predominant way of communication is yelling. And so these particular children that are raised in critical households where there's lots of yelling and maybe sarcasm and derision are really prone to anxiety and depression. So, which is very high right now among our preteens and adolescents. But it's treatable, but we definitely want to make sure that the way that we're communicating with them isn't exacerbating what could potentially be a big issue. Another reason is that as a parent, you may feel bad too, that all you're doing is yelling, or what you're consistently doing is yelling at your child and not able to manage your emotions enough to have meaningful, honest conversation. It could generate feelings of, frustrations and feeling guilty for behaving the way that you behave. And so that begs me to ask, if you notice that these are predominant ways that you're communicating, think about your childhood. Is this a behavior that was passed down to you from your parents? And if so, and you notice that, it can be unlearned. You can work with a professional to teach you how to better get your ideas across and to communicate your feelings to your children in a way that's not going to cause harm. And lastly, and I've said this again, modeling behavior is major. What they see, they're probably going to do. So if you yell and criticize and are sarcastic with your children, you'll probably see it down the line in the way that they either interact with their siblings or friends or other people at school. So I just ask you to ask yourself, is what I'm doing something that I want my child to emulate? And if the answer is no, you can work with people to identify different ways of communicating. There are lots of folks with resources to assist you. So that's a really loaded question, right? And I'm not saying, and again, no one is perfect. So I don't want you to go on a judgment spree, judging your parenting ability, but we can all benefit from doing things differently, especially if we've learned new information on how to better communicate. Communication is a process. Again, there's a lot of unlearning that we might benefit from doing in order to relearn how to better and more effectively get our needs met. So the next question is, when I'm angry at my youngest child, that baby, I often compare his behavior to his older brother. Is this problematic? I'm of the mindset that if you're asking, is it problematic, then you probably have a notion that it's not the most effective way to do things, that maybe there's something different that you can do. But yes, and again, there's no judgment. It is problematic. As an older sibling, I used to hear my younger sibling, I don't want to be compared to my sister. I'm my own person. And she did everything she could to stand apart, right? Which is understandable. She's not a clone. She's her own individual. And I say the same thing to you and your child. Your children are not clones, even if they're twins. They may literally share the same DNA, but their personalities are different, their spirits are different, their interests are probably different. So we have to celebrate that individuality and understand that even though your child's probably running your nerves right now, there's probably a reason. But you have to think about what's happening. We are still surviving through this pandemic. Emotions are high. Everything is just intensified. There is this heaviness in the air of uncertainty, and that really does affect children because they don't necessarily have the appropriate ways of coping that adults do. And sometimes adults falter as well. So stop your comparing, because it could build a level of resentment in your child where they don't feel like they're good enough. You're always comparing me to my brother or my sister, so you love that sibling more than you love me. You don't like me, you don't love me. And again, that can cause a rift in your relationship and leave you wondering why. Why is my child behaving this way? Why does this child seem to be more rebellious than the other? Well, when they don't feel like they're being loved for who they are and accepted, they're going to rebel. Negative attention is still attention. So they're going to have one of those needs met, and that sounds like a need to be understood and potentially a need for power, like a power struggle. So when you compare, it can, again, lead to feelings of resentment. It can also harm their self-esteem and lead to feelings of low self-worth. and again, damage relationships. So instead of comparing your children when you're, because I'm sure it happens when you're angry, right? Or when you're trying to get some level of compliance. You can sit down, I recommend that you sit down with a child that you feel is constantly not listening or paying attention or doing what you want or doing behaviors that you don't feel to be desirable. And you can sit down and speak to your child about the specific behaviors that he's displaying that you're not pleased with, the persistent misbehavior or whatever it is that's happening that you would like to see change. Now, they're children. They can't just wake up and be different. This is where the modeling comes in. This is where the honest conversation comes in. You sit down and you have a conversation about what's happening, and you all work together to identify alternative behaviors that are more acceptable, that are more amenable to you, and that are more appropriate. And I would ask your kid, honestly, help mommy understand why it is that when I ask you to do this, you do that. Because now you're joining in conversation. You're demonstrating that their opinion matters, that what they're thinking and feeling matters to you because you're asking them for feedback. But the thing is this: if you're asking, you have to be willing and ready to receive their response, whether it's what you want or not. And the one thing I suggest that you not do is that you not lash out if they say something that you consider to be hurtful, right? The point is not to chip away at who you are as a parent, but you want your child to open up to you and talk to you honestly. And if that means that maybe you have to hear about yourself from your child's perspective, hopefully that's going to be an open door to you doing things differently and your relationship with your children improving. So I would, as you're having this conversation or as time is going by, I would make sure to reiterate, no one is perfect. I'm not seeking perfection, but I am seeking consistent changed behavior. I expect mistakes to be made, but those are learning opportunities for us to work together as mom or dad and child so that we can be supportive of one another, because maybe something works and we can keep doing it, and maybe something that we try doesn't work, and then we can come together to generate a better solution to the problem. So it gives you the opportunity to bond while problem solving, and you'll learn a lot more about your child in the process. Making sure also through this process that you're praising your child's efforts. If you notice that he or she has sustained some considerable or even small change behavior, praise that. Praise the genuine effort. Not, you did such a good job, but be specific. I noticed that, for example, you didn't barge into mommy's office like you used to do last week while I'm on my conference calls. And I'm so grateful that you gave me some time. So what would you like to do as a reward? You want to make sure you include rewards in this whole system. It doesn't have to be something big. You can have them think about, especially since we're not really supposed to be out, we're supposed to be physically distancing. Generate like a small list of potential rewards that your children would like when they, demonstrate that desired behavior. And then you have them pick from one. It's offering structured choices, which makes them feel, again, that their opinion matters, that they're able to make decisions, they're responsible, and they're taking on more self-management, which is what you want them to do. So again, most importantly, it is imperative that you communicate the fact that you appreciate each child's individual gifts. And again, you're not looking for clones, but you want each of your children to be the best versions of themselves, and them knowing that they are the best is going to start with you. Communicating that you love what they offer, you love them as individuals, and you don't want them to be like anyone else because they are great just the way that they are. So that was a really good question. So our next question is, this is one that I see working overseas a lot. I've been taught to believe that being critical of my child motivates him to do what I want more often. This parent's really anxious about her child's future because, most parents work to secure the best for their children. Most parents that I work with want the best for their child. And sometimes some people are led to believe that being critical is a way for them to really get the ball moving right, is a good motivator. And again, this behavior is probably going to be rooted in the parent-child relationship that they received growing up. And so I can tell you that if you are highly critical of your children, it's not the best thing to do. It's not a good thing to do at all when it comes to parenting relationship. I was listening to a podcast the other day, a Brene Brown podcast, and she had Dr. Harriet Lerner on as her guest. It was an amazing episode. And one of the quotes that she stated was that it can be difficult to listen when they're being criticized. Like, if somebody's criticizing me, I'm not hearing anything other than what they don't like. And I've automatically switched into defensive mode, and I'm trying to think of ways to rebut all of their negative points. I'm thinking of ways in which to one-up what they're saying because they're digging at me. I'm not listening to anything else. And my emotions have intensified. So as an adult, that happens. So can you imagine how that happens with kids? I know how to speak for myself. I know the words to use. And even if I'm angry, sometimes I don't know the words to use. And I'm a trained professional, right? So with our children, they really do internalize the criticism. And it could make them feel less loved, less important, as if their parents, again, don't care about them, don't love them, and that can really lead to rebellious behavior. It's what we call like a negative feedback loop, because if all you're providing is criticism and no praise, then you're going to get that your child is not listening to you, your child is being rebellious, your child is doing the opposite of what it is that you want. And so then it's like, well, your child is like, well, all I hear is criticism, so why do I need to do anything if all they're going to do is criticize? Which is going to lead to you probably yelling at them and criticizing them more, which feeds into the I'm not going to listen, I'm just going to do my own thing. So there's this negative feedback loop. And at some point, someone is going to, if you want it to be different, if you want it to improve, and for it to stop in a positive sense, someone is going to have to do something differently, and it's probably not going to be the child. Because, again, they're learning their behavior from you, the parent. So criticism, anger, they can lead to defiance, right? They can lead to your child being secretive. That behavior can lead to your child withdrawing from you. And as children are maturing and progressing through life, being secretive is not something that you want. Because when they're experiencing distress, they need to have a safe space. Would you rather them go to a friend that's less informed or their parent that has the resources to assist if they are going through something? Again, harsh criticism, growing up in a really critical household can lead to damaged relationships. And one thing I find to be really important is that there is so much power in an apology. As parents, you don't always do things right. And I know that you do your best. There's a lot of weight. There's a lot of responsibility. But if we're trying to model ways in which to behave, you also want to consider being open to learning how to genuinely apologize when you do something to hurt your children, whether it's intentional or not. And the ideas that I've heard from parents is, I'm the parent, there's no need for me to apologize. They're the kid. Why would I apologize to my child? And so in my opinion, and in my estimation, you're teaching them how to behave. So again, if you want them to be critical, keep criticizing. If you want them to understand the value of apology, which can go a long way to mending relationships, which can go a long way to showing that I made a mistake and I want to make amends for it, and that I love you and I'm sorry for what I've done or how I made you feel, this is something that you're going to have to model as a parent. So it also, apologies and things, demonstrating how to apologize is going to have a long-term effect to your children being able to form, quality interpersonal relationships. You don't want to raise, well, I would hope that you don't want to raise someone that doesn't see the fault in their behavior. We are not perfect. Not you as a parent and not your child. But learning to apologize means that there's a sense of humility, that you know that you're not perfect, and you know that you still have room to grow, and that you want to be able to mend a fissure that maybe you've created. And so like I said, this goes a long way to gaining respect and demonstrating that you are still willing to improve a relationship that matters to you. So parents, apologizing is key when maybe you've done something to hurt your child or say something that hurts your child, whether it was intentional or not. So we're almost done with the questions. Our next question: why is self-esteem so important to child development? If my child has too high self-esteem, could they become conceited? That's not something that I've heard until I started working in Asia. Self-esteem is extremely important to child development because it is going to reverberate in your child's life forever, in all honesty. Up until about 60, when your self-esteem is pretty much set. But self-esteem is this thing that it can fluctuate depending on what's happening in a person's life. But you want, in a child's formative years, you want to be able to help them develop a healthy sense of self-concept, of self-worth, of self-esteem. And kids that don't have the highest level of self-regard, love for themselves, there's a higher probability of them being depressed in their life. Maybe they will fall short of their potential, or maybe they'll learn to tolerate abusive relationships and situations, meaning that they may lack the ability to assert themselves and their needs when dealing with aggressive people. So building high, helping your children with self-esteem is going to help them to be more resilient, to be able to communicate their needs better, to love and accept themselves, to be able to bounce back, again, being resilient, bounce back from perceived failure. A level of healthy self-esteem correlates to having better interpersonal relationships. They'll take risks more. They'll be willing to be more outspoken, and things like that. And it creates like a sense of safety. It's like a safety net, right? Where low self-esteem is pretty much the opposite. It makes people a bit more fearful to step outside of their comfort zone and do things that are different. So taking risks and things. So, like I said, over the lifespan, your self-esteem can ebb and flow depending on what it is that you're dealing with, or what you've contending with, job, moving, friendships, things of that nature. But having a secure self-esteem is going to help you to be able to accept and bounce back, again, from perceived failure. So when they're in school, and there's so much that happens in schools, you want your child to be able to have that level of self-assurance that no matter what happens, they have the power, the intrinsic power, to be able to bounce back, and it doesn't damage their self-worth. That if something doesn't work out, it doesn't mean that they're not worthy, but this thing just didn't work, but the next thing might. And so again, as a parent, you play an integral role in the development of healthy self-esteem, in the ways that you communicate with your child, how you talk to your child, the messaging that you give to your child, how you interact with your child. You are literally, the self-esteem bank at the beginning. And you're teaching them how to see and care and talk to themselves as well. So on the flip side, if your child has a haughty sense of self-assuredness, that can often look like a conceited behavior, which in most cases is rooted in low self-esteem. So, and it can be kind of off-putting. which can damage relationships, interpersonal relationships, working relationships with people. Because not many people want to be around someone that they perceive to be arrogant or that thinks that they're better. So, again, as your children are growing up, it's teaching them a sense of humility that we're all perfect. Now, scratch that we're not perfect, that we can be the best versions of ourselves, but that we're not any better than the next person, regardless of their circumstances. And again, this is a learned behavior. So we have to model the behavior that we want to see in our kids. And so the last question, what are some techniques that I can use to improve my communication? Right. So at some point in our lives, we can all benefit from improved communication skills. And a lot of things that I've learned, it's kind of like I knew, but it wasn't solidified until I went through my area of study. Some of it's what some would consider to be common sense, but again, everyone was raised in households that were probably vastly different, so I don't use that as a metric. So I would say that if you notice that you're continually having struggles with people that you're communicating with, either family, children, professional relationships, I would really sit down and identify someone, if let's just say if it's professional, that you trust, and ask their honest perception of how it is that you communicate. Now, again, don't take the things that they say personally, and hopefully they're not going to respond in ways to hurt you. But you want to get an honest assessment of how you're being perceived. I've had to have this conversation with people that I love a few times when it comes to my countenance, right? Way before I became a therapist. So it's like when you wear your feelings on your face, not everybody is going to be amenable to that. And if you really want to engage in quality connection with people, you really have to watch how you are not only presenting yourself verbally, but non-verbally, because most communication is nonverbal. I think 70% of communication is nonverbal. So you don't want to be off-putting in a nonverbal sense. And you don't want your nonverbals to speak louder than your verbals do. So I would say if it's with your children, again, if you are wanting to improve communication with your kids, be humble enough to go and ask their perspective and not take things personally, right? And again, it shows that you value your children's opinions and perspectives. So have a talk with someone that you really love or trust, and you're asking them their opinion about your efficiency as a communicator. You know, do you feel heard when you talk to me? Are there things that disrupt the communication process when we're talking? Is there something that I do that you don't necessarily like? Is there something that I do that makes you feel understood and seen? So I would honestly ask them specifics about observable behavior and how does this observable behavior, meaning, so what I say about observable behavior is a negative could be when someone says something I don't like, I roll my eyes. That's an observable behavior. That's literally what you are observed doing. And I would ask, so if you notice that I do these things, how does it make you feel? You want to, also speak about what feelings are elicited when these things are happening that you notice that I do, that I might not be aware of. So some other observable behavior in the not so positive realm could be you interrupt me when I'm talking, or I don't feel heard because there's not like a sense of joining in. Something we call like a suggestive approximation, like when you're giving your undivided attention, you're like, oh, okay, so you're saying this, or you're reflecting what you're hearing. That's a good communication strategy because you're attuned to them. Another observable behavior is, in a negative sense, you don't make eye contact with me when you talk. And that's a real cultural thing. It depends on the culture of the person that you're talking to, whether this is a sign of honesty or dishonesty. There may be cultures that don't find it respectful to make eye contact with the person that you're communicating with. Whereas in my culture, I've been raised that if they're not looking you in your face when you're talking, there's something wrong. They're not being honest. They're not telling the truth. So it's really important to know your audience, right? And especially as a mental health professional, eye contact is key because you want to look out for the changes in behavior, the nuance, you know, the things, the twitches when something is mentioned. And it's just a way in which to join in when someone is really sharing something important to you. So if you're trying to do things differently in a communication sense, these are some skills that you can practice straight away. That's going to help you to improve your communication with people that you love or maybe with people that you don't necessarily care for. So you want to practice the skill of actively listening, and that is really listening to what your communication partner is saying without thinking of how to respond. So you're really listening to what they're saying in the moment. And that means that you're giving them your undivided attention. You are not on your phone. You are not checking for your text messages. Actually, your phone is somewhere else because you want this person to know that this conversation I'm engaging in is the most important at the moment. So I want to make sure you see that. Again, you want to use what we call I statements. And I statements are structured like this. I feel, and then you give the emotion, and then you say why. I feel happy when I get to spend one-on-one time with you. Or I feel frustrated when I try to talk to you and you don't listen. So what that does is it takes the blame off of the other person and you assume the responsibility. So it minimizes defensive behavior. And it allows you to connect how you are feeling to something that is actually happening. And again, you don't want to seem like you're blaming. So instead of saying, you never listen to me whenever I need to talk to you, that right there is automatically going to put someone on the defensive. So then you reframe it by saying, I feel unheard when I try to talk and you're not available. So you have your observable behavior and you have your feeling attached, and it starts with I. So it's all about you in that moment, not necessarily putting the blame on another person. So validation is really key. I have a teen who struggles with communicating with her mom because she always tells me, well, she's just really judgmental and she just really invalidates anything that I share with her or minimizes the importance of what it is that she shares. So validation is key. And validation, what is validation? It's kind of like, it's a statement, I can see how what I said made you feel that way. So that's validating the person's feelings, that they don't feel heard or supported or their feelings are hurt. That doesn't mean you agree, but that means that you're taking the time to understand where they're coming from before you outright just discount what they're saying. Because to make someone feel invalidated is going to make it very difficult in the future for them to share intimate details of their life with you if they don't feel that you're going to hear them in the first place. So working on validating before you offer your perspective is going to be key. So reflecting is a skill of kind of repeating back what it is in your own words that you're hearing from your communication partner. And again, it's communicating that I'm listening intently to you. You have my undivided attention. And I'm trying to show you in my own words that I hear and I understand. And so this is one that I still have to work on. Assume an open posture. And so what that means is you don't want to have your arms folded. You don't want to be far away. You want to lean in, which shows that you want to be a part of that space. You want to be a part of this conversation. And you want to have as open a posture as possible, meaning something that you want to look as if you are welcoming. So no folded arms, nothing like that, because that looks very closed. Even though, like, for me, that's how I'm comfortable. Like, I'm pensive, right? When my arms are folded, I'm like this. But that's not the way some people take it. So again, if your message has to be comprehensible to the person that you're trying to communicate with. It's not that you want the message to be what you intended. Now, we aren't responsible for anyone else's perception, but we are responsible for our level of communication, right? You want to be a good listener, make eye contact, join in their conversation. Nod your head when you understand what they're saying. Put your phone away and things like that. And minimize the judgment, right? And that takes practice. So I have this exercise, and it's called the communication role model. And I did it already, right? Because I come prepared. And what it is it's very simple. I want you to think of two people. I want you to think of someone that you've experienced that is an easy person to communicate with. Like, they make you feel heard, seen, comfortable. And then I want you to think of someone that is the flip opposite, that puts you on edge, doesn't listen, and I have mine completed. And so I'm giving a shout out to Dr. Brent. Let me add Dr. Brenda Brewster is my positive communication model, right? And I just listed the initials of the one that is my non-example, my example of what not to be, just the initials MS. But the reasons that Dr. Brewster is my positive communication model, and these are the reasons: she is calm, like, no matter what. I have never seen Dr. Brewster riled up, and I probably never will, because that's just not in her. She has a soothing voice. She makes eye contact with you when you talk. She reflects the message that you're communicating. She evokes a feeling of understanding. Like, when I talk to her, she really makes me feel understood. She uses positive language, and she doesn't get drawn into negativity. I have literally never seen Dr. Brewster involved in any negative situation, or if there was something going on, she would always look for a way in which to ameliorate the situation. I mean, she checks in, but the biggest thing is that she is consistent. This is how she is all the time, and that is something that I aspire to be. I don't want to be affected by the behavior of other people, and even as a professional, that is something that I have to work on at this stage. And so my negative example, I'm just going to say MS, she's verbally accosting, meaning she gets in your face and she yells. She's done that to me a few times. And she's just loud, and and it's not positive, and that's without the relationship. There's a difference between being loud at someone and loud with someone. Like, with my friends, we just loud anyway, but it's not in an aggressive manner because we know each other, we love each other. She interrupts often, she's critical, and she uses subliminal messaging when she's talking to you or about you, but doesn't want to be direct, and that irks me. She doesn't make eye contact, and she is defensive. She doesn't have an open posture. I feel that she is a dishonest individual, and she's inconsistent. So this communication role model exercise is going to help you identify things and that you've noticed in other people that you either want to integrate in your communication style or that you want to shy away from. And if you notice that some of these behaviors and things that you do, you either want to grow some of them or some of them you want to minimize. But it takes some real self-reflection and growth to be able to do that. So that's something that you can do on your own. If you have a therapist, you can do it with your therapist. You can even do this with your children. Kids are very perceptive, by the way. And so our time is drawing to a close, but I never want to leave you without providing you resources. And so these are some books that I've read or I'm going to read that deal with communication of a parent-child context. So this is one of my favorite ones that I recommend all the time, and it's called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And this one is by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. I bought mine on Amazon. I even have one in China. Between a Parent and Child by Dr. Haim Janot. No Drama Discipline by Daniel J. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. And these are some podcasts that I have heard of. Cool Moms, Experiencing Motherhood, Single and Black, Something to Cry About, and Unruffled by Janet Landberry. So Lastly, I'm going to leave you with, I found some information on hhs.gov, and I'm going to leave you with ways to improve communication with your kids. And the first one is provide warmth and support. You can't expect your children to come and communicate with you if you don't create an atmosphere of understanding and support. So provide warmth and support. Create opportunities to talk. This is a really big one. Maybe you want to start a nighttime ritual where y'all have conversations right before bedtime, and you let them tell you about their day and let them ask you about yours. So it'll be something that they clamor for, just to have that one-on-one, undivided attention from their mom or dad or parent or guardian or whomever is the custodial person in their life. Listen to your kids. I'll leave it at that. Ask open-ended questions. So instead of, did you have a good day at school? Their automatic answers will be like, sure. But you want to ask them open-ended questions. So tell me, what were 3 things at, school that you really appreciated today? They got to think, oh, that's really specific. And so it gives them time to respond. Do not overreact. You have to watch your reactions because a lot of times your children may share things that you are not ready to hear. And so if you want them to keep sharing, you have to make sure you minimize your reaction. Even if you are bursting on the inside, you have to modify how you react and respond and make sure to communicate a sense of understanding and support. Validate before you respond, just to show that you hear them, you are trying to understand, and then ask your questions. And lastly, talk early, often, and honestly about sensitive topics and risky behavior. Our kids are inundated with a lot, and we just want to make sure that we are providing a safe space for them to be able to communicate and share so that they know that they have the support that they need to grow and develop into the best versions of themselves. And I'll say, I love this quote from Dr. Harriet Lerner. We were talking about apology earlier, and it states that no apology has meaning if we aren't listening to the hurt party's anger or pain. Remember that we all play a role in the healthy development of our kids, and we may not get it right every time, but if we're consistently learning and growing, things are going to get better. So with that, I'm going to close. I am Kendall Tyson again, owner of Aspire Counseling and Wellness Center. You can reach me on multiple platforms, my Facebook page with the same name. You can find me on Instagram at Aspire Counseling Well. You can find me on Twitter at Aspire CWC. And I have a YouTube channel, Aspire Counseling and Wellness Center. Thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, just send me an email at kendall.tyson@aspirecounselingwell.com. Check out my website, aspirecounselingwell.com, and I look forward to working with you in the future and continuing to provide you more help and mental health information. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so make sure you are making your mental health a priority. Have a great day, everyone.